there, Savecrackers, get your combinations ready because it is time for the Comic Vault! That's right! A vault full of comics for you and me! Today on the Comic Vault we have a fairly recent edition, just a couple weeks ago. Dynamite's The Shadow! I have to say, I was super excited for this. Oh, The Shadow, written by Garth Ennis, are you kidding me? Oh, I was so excited. I started being a fan of Garth Ennis when I read Punisher, the Marvel Knights run, and then it continued into Punisher Max, and that just became legendary. I mean, so many people like this, the Garth Ennis Punisher run. It's great. And then I read Preacher, and I started reading The Boys, and all this great fun stuff came from Garth Ennis. And then I found some stuff that was even historical, so I started reading that too, and oh, Garth Ennis, he just caught my eye. And then I read a story called Dix, and it was really, really awful. Really awful. Don't read that one. Anyway, today we're talking about The Shadow. So, one of the things that Garth Ennis really has going for him with some of his period pieces, and I say period not meaning Elizabethan, generally that's what you mean when you say period, but set during the late 30s, early 40s, I believe. At least during World War II of some sort. And what's cool about Garth Ennis is he really knows his history. And he will put you directly smack dab in the middle of history, and he will flood you with it. If you don't know anything about history, he will help you. And he will give you some of the more interesting details about history that maybe you didn't realize. He starts off this book with telling of how cruel, between 1931 and 1945, how cruel the Japanese troops were to the Chinese. And he will tell you about all that stuff. The first 2 or 3 pages are devoted to that. And he does that because the main point of this first issue is, the plot is that here's the Shadow, we're introduced to the Shadow, we're introduced to some of the characters that the Shadow regularly associates with, including Margo Lane and others. And he spends the first few pages tracking down and, well, killing these 2 Japanese military men who I believe are smuggling things either into or out of the country. I forget which one it is now. But and then the rest of the issue is about the fallout of this dockyard murder that happened by the supposed Shadow character. Does he exist? Oh, the Shadow. What is your stance on the Shadow? Now, I gotta say, I was a huge fan of the Shadow since I walked into a flea market, caught the guy who was selling stuff from this particular booth, and he had some tapes of the Shadow, and I said, I'm not sure I really want to get into the Shadow. And he said, here, Vince, take this tape and listen to this particular one. This particular track is a radio show, and you will enjoy it. And then you'll be back to get the rest of them. And I was like, well, sure, I'll give it a shot, but I don't guarantee I'll be back to get the rest of them. And I did. And so I got everything. Oh my god, I had to get all the rest of the Shadow stuff. So, I don't have all the Archie Shadows. I certainly don't have the Street Smith Shadows, but I do have every Shadow comic published since 1970-something. So everything from Denny O'Neil and up. I do have the Archie #1 Shadow, but anyway, we're talking about this Shadow. So this Shadow, I do feel like it has a little bit in common with the radio show Shadow. There have been different incarnations of the Shadow, and each one has a little bit of a different one. I mean, there's one version of the Shadow where Lamont Cranston is some rich playboy that the Shadow uses. So he convinces people that he actually looks like Lamont Cranston using his mental powers. But that's kind of what I expected. I sort of expected to see a complete, shaking it up. But really, you get a little bit of what people expect. Lamont Cranston, wealthy young man about town. That's exactly what you get in this thing, is Lamont Cranston is the Shadow. And you can tell that Lamont Cranston puts on this sort of a playboyish persona that, it's something that you would see in Zorro. It's something that you would see in Batman. Of course, this guy predates Batman. But, I love the mythos of the Shadow. I like this guy who can cloud men's minds so that you cannot see him. I like the idea that he has mental powers that are not just clouding men's minds. He even toward the end of this book demonstrates that he can override his body's natural need for like heat and things of the sort. He can control himself using his mind. Margo Lane walks out onto the terrace and says, "Your skin is freezing." He's like, "Well, I wanted to be out here. I'm looking at the city. I'm thinking. This is my thinking place. This is my thinking temperature." That's not what he says, but I digress. So, Margo Lane is clearly set up to be a lover in this book. That's one of the things that's always been kind of iffy about the Shadow. Margo Lane is, people say, faithful companion against crime. What is she? Is she a concubine? What is she? What is Margo Lane? His best friend? His fiancée? His wife? His lover? Is she just a live-in girlfriend? What is she? She is, in this one, definitely the lover of Lamont Cranston. In the Shadow movie, she was the love interest for Lamont Cranston. But back in the radio show, we really didn't know what she was, and that made it seem kind of questionable in moral standings. So people sometimes had a problem with it. But with this book, she is definitely a lover now, which I'm okay with that. I don't have a problem with it. I like the idea that Margo Lane and Lamont Cranston have some reason to be together other than just mutual interest in solving crimes. I always thought that was kind of shaky. But another thing about Garth Ennis's love for history. Sometimes Garth Ennis's love for history can be kind of encyclopedic, and he takes it away from being a story and more into being a history lesson. And that's sometimes it's necessary, but it also slows down pacing. This book really doesn't have that except for the very first few pages, so I think we might be walking a line here a little bit, looking at Garth Ennis doing sort of some encyclopedic stuff with the Shadow, and, you know, that's okay, but me personally, I really wanted a fast-paced Shadow book, and I think that Garth Ennis can give us that. I just think that we might have to kind of wade through a few issues worth of encyclopedia. So I think it'll be okay. I just think, in fact, this book's really very light on plot. This is really mostly about trying to get you to see who these people are and how they interact with each other. And so it's really setting the scene. There's not a lot that I can either say whether it's good or bad as to the first issue. I'd say it's worth picking up if you're interested in these old characters. Personally, I like these guys. I like the Shadow. I like the Phantom. I like the Rocketeer, even though it's not an old character. It's just a character designed to fit this type of mold. And that stuff interests me. Oh, another thing. Aaron Campbell's artwork is really fairly pretty. The thing that I like about this is that there's a lot of chances for the Carlos Lopez does the colors, and there's lots of deep reds. There's lots of dark blacks, deep reds. I think that's what's really cool about the Shadow, is that this guy is not just gloom and doom and in the darkness. There's also some color in this book. Granted, I'll admit the color is largely his. I'm not sure what you'd call that. I'm going to call it a scarf, but his scarf and blood seems to be the main color palette for this thing. But the Shadow is a very looming guy. I mean, it's what's really weird about the Shadow character in this one is that he has nothing. It's almost Frank Millerish in the sense that he's talking about the city. He's talking about what the Shadow knows. There's a lot of inner monologue going on here, and there's some kind of self-righteous monologue, which I find to be just a little bit odd. But I don't have a problem with it because his monologue also cleverly takes all of the Shadow sayings and that Shadow way of speaking and puts it into sort of a more palatable thing. I mean, I think there's a lot of writers that get excited and they say, oh, every character must have its line and I must fit it in there somewhere, even if it doesn't work. Well, I'm going to read some of this to you. Maybe I shouldn't, but I'm going to. Maybe it'll slow down the pacing of my review. Anyway, the Shadow says things like, when the time came, Imperial Japan would make a fine partner for Nazi Germany. I know. I know the strange tides on which destiny ebbs and flows. I know that fate sometimes needs a guiding hand. I know how to place the pieces on the board. I know what has been and what must be. I know the greater game. For I know what evil lurks in the hearts of men. So it's not just, I know what evil lurks in the hearts of men. Who knows? The Shadow knows. It's not just this stuff shoved in here. It feels like a larger piece. It feels like something would naturally roll off the tongue. So to some extent, I feel like he's trying to, he, meaning Garth Ennis, is trying to put these sayings in here early on so that he can just move on and just get to the guts of the Shadow and put his spin on the character and do something interesting with him. And so I feel like the first issue is getting past that. If you find the first issue to be not extremely palatable, I don't know for certain, but we're going to see what happens. I think the second issue could be good, and I think the first issue is okay. So, thanks for watching the Comic Vault, guys, and we'll catch you next time. But first, let me tell you, the Comic Vault is huge, large, it's not small. It's quite a big vault that can be bought from. That's right. Go to wearegeeksnotnerds.com and click on the Comic Vault. Buy some comics. Enjoy yourself. And you can also donate to the Comic Vault or Geekvolution, whatever you feel like. Feel free to send us stuff. Just don't make it disgusting. Please don't send us Twinkies. I would be upset if you sent us Twinkies. But you can go to our P.O. Box, which is Geekvolution, P.O. Box 14183, Lenexa, Kansas 66285. So thanks for watching the Comic Vault, guys. We'll catch you later.